American social media is erupting with discussions about the nature of political violence and dangerous rhetoric. But two of America's biggest adversaries are loving it and are encouraging Americans to tear each other apart. Just why are Russia and China all in on the Charlie Kirk assassination? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. So, according to Utah Governor Spencer Cox, he has said America's adversaries, like Russia and China, are trying to encourage violence by spreading disinformation online in the wake of the killing of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. And he appealed to the public to say, listen, don't let them get to you. Now, to be clear, the elected leadership of both parties has strongly condemned the political violence and the killing of a political commentator like Charlie Kirk. Again, universally. We looked it up when it happened. From AOC and Bernie Sanders to Nancy Mace and President Trump, they've all said, well, almost everyone has said that political violence has no place in our system, that we need to allow justice to work, and that this is not who we are as a country. But social media posts are amplifying some extreme voices, and it's doubly so given that America's adversaries, this is red meat for them. It serves their objectives so much when Americans call for violence against the other side, right? He said, quote, "We have bots from Russia, China, and all over the world that are trying to instill misinformation and encourage violence. I would encourage you to ignore those, turn off those streams." He said more information would be released later. Now, what I think is interesting is that I want to point out some of the Russian messaging. Now, when we go to Russian messaging, we can't know what the Russian bots are pushing because it's a cat and mouse game, and we won't know we've caught the mouse until somebody tells us about it, right? Again, U.S. intelligence agencies probably are putting out these bulletins about who's pushing what kind of narratives. But what we can do is tell sort of the narratives that these governments are pushing, because we can look on their publicly facing websites, right? For Russia, this is the site RT. Now, RT has a bunch of videos or a bunch of articles that are meant to push a couple of narratives, right? Including the West is weak, the West is the actual aggressor in Ukraine. The U.S. is failing and also unbelievably mean, and right-wing movements are good and awesome. But again, you can see there's two different articles here, opinions saying how good Britain's Unite the Kingdom rally is, which again, I don't think it's because Russia believes that stuff. I think they just have a sense in general that these right-wing movements within these countries are less confrontational towards Russia. But what I thought was interesting is there is one article, for example, that was in RT recently, basically saying that the boomers love political violence, and that they love cracking down on the evil system, right? They love political violence, and political violence is awesome, essentially. Right? Talk about this boomer derangement syndrome, and just, again, it's hard to even pull together this, but you can see here, there's another op-ed that again is obviously trying to inflame U.S. fissures, trying to put a racial spin on the killing of a Ukrainian refugee by an American. Right, making the kind of preposterous claim that the murder was ignored because the victim is white and the killer black, which is sort of comical because, well, frankly, we heard all about it until the next killing. But you can see, again, there's RT covering, linking this killing to other hot-button issues, and really emphasizing just sort of the key divisions within the country, finding these really hot button points that really inflame passions and just trying to dig their finger into it. And you can see the Chinese have an even more explicit policy, where here is from the South China Morning Post, a Chinese government English language news arm. essentially saying the opinion of a Chinese writer that says, listen, this killing of American commentator Charlie Kirk, he goes, this is a natural outgrowth of of America's broken nationalism. He says, American nationalism is rooted, this is from the article, quote, rooted in the mythos of liberty, individualism, and moral exceptionalism. From the founding fathers to modern populist movements amplified by Hollywood, mass media, and algorithmic echo chambers, patriotism is expressed as a belief in one's values are inseparable from the nation's identity. He says this is volatile. It thrives on personal grievance, elevates the individual to ideological warrior, and erodes the space for compromise, right? And then he continues to be like, look, there are firings, online abuse, disputes over flag protocol. It's a society where political identity is existential. The flag itself, once a unifying symbol, is now a litmus test of allegiance. You see how China's gloating over this? Now, look at this. In contrast, China's nationalism is structured and collective. It emphasizes unity and shared purpose. Patriotism is a civic responsibility. National narrative is shaped by historical experience and cultural continuity, encourages alignment with broader social goals. This model is a kind of cohesion that democracies struggle to maintain. It is strategic and deeply rooted in historic memory and framed around aspirations for national rejuvenation. Communist Party's emphasis on harmony comes at the expense of heterodoxy, right? And this is, I want you guys to understand, this is exactly what China wants. China wants this in the worst way. They want to be able to say, they love pointing to America and saying, look, their society, they say their democracy makes them strong. They say their free speech makes their ideas better and bigger and higher quality. They say that they're powerful and rich because they have these. But then whenever there's something like this, they get to go, look, these guys want to kill each other. They hate each other. They go, can you imagine us Chinese living in a country where we want to hate each other and kill each other? They go, this is obviously a fundamental flaw in the way Americans think and operate that we Chinese simply don't have. And this is not just directed at China, but they also say, listen, they believe it. They think it's true. They're like, America is weaker because they all want to kill each other. And they're like, China's strength is in its unity of effort. And again, it's one of those things that is hard to argue because, well, I don't believe it's true, but there is plenty of evidence, right, where China says, listen, we have this 100-year national goal. You Americans only try to live your lives one election at a time or one media cycle at a time. And for all the flaws, right, China has to contend with the reality that China doesn't have a mass migration problem, not because they're not welcoming the migrants, because nobody wants to go there because they're a brutal place to live and they are limited, deeply limited in economic opportunity. It's nothing like the United States. We are the beacon of opportunity for the entire world. And we are orders of magnitude. The average American worker is more productive, more capable than any other worker on planet Earth. They are freer to start a business. They are freer in speech. We can say almost anything in this country, and the government won't stop us. You can literally, look, Kanye can go on fucking TV and say some pretty horrific stuff. And so I point these things out because China doesn't want these to be true. Russia doesn't want these things to be true. It's so uncomfortable for the Chinese and for the Russians because they say, listen, our strength, our economic power is in the fact that we don't have these kinds of issues, that we are a unified under a single strong man who silences dissent, who crushes individual liberty, who, does these things for the benefit of the collective. And everyone in that country has to look and say, well, then why is the United States bigger and more powerful? And part of it is because we are politically diverse, but we have a unifying ethos. Again, the stuff outlined in the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the American mandate, right? This commitment to a freer, more prosperous society. The problem that you get into is that the president himself seems to disagree. And this is what I think was pretty fucked up. So on Fox and Friends, he went on, this is the right-wing news network Fox, their morning show, Fox and Friends, they asked the president a pretty puff piece question. They said, how can Americans come back together to fix this country after the fatal shooting in Utah on Wednesday that conservatives have blamed on Democrats and the media? And Trump appeared, but Trump said, bring the country together. He said, quote, I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The president said there are radicals on both sides of the political spectrum, but he said the radicals on the left are the problem. Trump said, quote, they're vicious, they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women's sports, they want transgender for everyone. They want open borders. Right. And he also was like, radicals on the right just want less crime. And this is troubling for a bunch of reasons. First off, I understand that this sort of messaging about like trans everything or whatever gets votes, but that's absolutely not the case. Again, they want men and women's sports. I don't know or care. I don't know what they want transgender for everyone. I don't know what that means, but open borders, again, Joe Biden deported more people than Donald Trump has. Trump still can't meet Biden's deportation numbers because Biden actually had people in his organization who knew how the deportation system works. Joe Biden holds the record for the most deportations ever done. And remember, he kept the border shut, by the way, through all of COVID. And actually, the Supreme Court had to actually come out and say, hey, Joe Biden, you have to reopen the border. You cannot just simply declare a national emergency for for 3 straight years. So reality and Trump's reality just have nothing to do with each other. Just like the reality that's saying, oh, well, radicals on the conservative movement are simply people who don't like crime. The radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. That kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today. Right? Representative Bob Onder blamed politicians, the media, and, quote, all the rats out there for the shooting, while Onder called leftists' ideology pure evil. So, again, what I always point out is that when there are right-wing shooters in places, again, like El Paso or the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, or, you know, even the death of those 2 lawmakers just 4 months ago, Democratic lawmakers, where the shooter was an anti-abortion activist who, again, had a giant kill list of other left-wing politicians. There was no politician who said shit like this, who said, well, right-wing ideology is pure evil. No. At most, the phenomenal racism of some of those shooters is pure evil, but that's something that even, again, the average American right-wing person is not like a white supremacist. But what I also want to point out is that Trump himself is wrong about right-wing radicals. They are not simply people who don't like crime. And I point to one of the people who has gotten embroiled into this is right-wing shitposter podcaster Nick Fuentes, who has been banned from every single platform, whose political views are so horrific by almost any civilized nation standards that I can't describe them on this channel. You can go to his Wikipedia page. And the best analogy I can give you is that Nick Fuentes believes that the best government for the United States of America and the best social contract is one modeled after the Taliban in Afghanistan, except being Christian instead of, in fact, he praised conservative religious aspects of the Taliban governance. So again, you cannot sit there and be like, well, extremists on the right just don't like crime. It's like, yeah, but he defines crime as existing while something other than white. So understand that this move of massive political violence, of which Trump is endorsing, Trump is absolutely endorsing this. Listen, the Republican Party is not pure evil, okay? That is not a belief I have. That is not a belief that the other politicians in the United States have endorsed. It just isn't. Do I think some of their policies are like kicking the poor in the teeth? Yeah. Do I think some of them are lining their own pockets to the expense of the country? Yeah, for sure. Do I think they're bad at their job? Yeah, definitely. By and large. Again, I call the bright moments when I see them. But I would never call them pure evil, right? Because that is divisive rhetoric that inspires people to violence. But somehow It's fine when the president does it. It's fine when he says, I don't care about national unity. It's fine when he says, I want to purge leftism from the fucking world. Yeah. So anyway, guys, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Be decent to each other. Guys, we are helping out the units in Ukraine who are holding the line against Russian aggression. In Kramatorsk, units like Azov, the Lyut Brigade, are fighting tooth and nail against Russian advances, and in places, they're even driving the Russians back. So we're going to help them out. They are holding the fortress city of Kramatorsk, place that I've personally been to. And best of all, an anonymous donor is matching 100%. Every dollar you give will be matched by an anonymous donor. So help them out. The link to the fundraiser is in the description. It's a US 501c3, and donors can get hooked up with different rewards at different tiers, including a patch from the Kramatorsk Patrol Police, which is kind of sick. Patch from the guys at the Corvus of the unit of the 93rd Brigade. These are one of the best drone units in the entire Ukrainian military. Guys I have also personally met. So check it out and help them out. Plus, a huge thank you to the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News, guys like AL90, James Porsche, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alex Williams, Henry Roussier, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.